Well, hello there and good morning. Thank you for joining me. I am Frost PDP, and today we're doing something a little different. We're not talking about or playing video games. We're going to talk a little bit about anime, and in this case, we're going to talk about Berserk, the 2016 adaptation. First things first, guys. If you haven't been able to tell by the picture, Berserk is not for children. I know it's a cartoon. It's not for children. It is borderline X-rated, and I'll say this, I like to start with positives, but one of the things Berserk doesn't do right is that sometimes the entire series, it's felt like it appeals to violence and sex as a way to get attention as opposed to make a point. But then again, my number one compliment for for this thing is that it follows the manga. It might not be step by step, but it gets the characterization of these seemingly random medieval people with different sorts of destinies. It gets them right, actually. Um, I read the manga years ago. I still read new chapters when they come out, and I love it. It's very deep. If you go beyond the surface layer, if you look at what motivates the violence, you will see that Guts has severe post-traumatic stress syndrome, as does Casca. Obviously, they went through a demonic ritual, and they are the only survivors, just about. Um, but you won't understand that if you haven't seen either, at the very least, the original anime adaptation, which doesn't even have the Skull Knight who debuted in episode 6, or, if you don't know what's going on up until the point that we meet the Black Swordsman, Guts, the main character. So let me talk about Guts for a minute. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, so I'll only cover what I believe you should know up to this point, which is Guts was a mercenary with a group called the Band of the Hawk. Their leader was a man named Griffith. He's that guy with the white hair you keep seeing flashbacks with. If you didn't know the old series, you wouldn't know who that is. They barely mention him other than that Guts wants to maybe love or kill the man. We don't really know which because it's not made clear. They talk about Behelits, which is that little egg thing with a face on it, but they don't talk about it. They don't explain what it is. They expect you, the viewer, to go in knowing this. And I think that's part of why this series is so interesting to me and so controversial. It's because it really is for the people that know Berserk and know where it's going and have an investment of some kind in the characters. When you meet who seems to be like the secondary character in this version, which I'm not sure she's supposed to be, but Lady Farnese, or Farnese, or however you say it, she is, well, kind of crazy, actually. You find out she's not just some ordinary, pompous, rich woman who was put in charge of these, retainer knights. She's actually kind of dangerous. And there's hints that her man-at-arms Serpio is more than he looks like. I don't even think they mentioned his name more than once or twice. So, I will say that if you know where this is going, if you know what the plot is, if you read the manga, you probably understand what some of the imagery going on is, because it's really deep. It's really on a subconscious level. It represents Guts' nightmares when he's having fits from the brand. It represents Casca being completely lost because of just she can't function from what happened to her. But if you didn't know any of this, you're walking in and you're getting all these weird flashbacks, but they're not telling you very much, and it's really just looks like a whole bunch of horror movie stuff. And if you don't understand exactly how the God Hand works, which I don't think anyone on Earth does at this point, it's really convoluted. If you don't have some inkling of what the greater mythology of Berserk is, you're gonna have a hard time following it. One thing that's complained about a lot is the animation, and I have to say it's up or down, it's hit or miss. Some things look really cool. Some of the auras around the demons, the purple, it looks stunning. It looks like what you'd expect demonic presence to look like. But then the timing gets weird on it. Scene transfer. I've got this one picture in my head of Isidoro, or whatever his name is, a little runt kid that showed up in the first episode, disappeared for a few episodes, and now is following Guts around. Yeah, there's one scene where like he's kind of, it feels like he's just kind of getting dragged off. Like, hey, what am I doing here? I don't know. I don't know. It has its misses. But if you're a fan of the manga, you already kind of know where it's going. Your brain just tunes that out. You go, okay, I know that as stupid as this scene might be, I understand why it is relevant to the development of this character. Because I have an attachment to this character that exists before this show's first episode. If you've ever played a Berserk video game, if you've ever seen one of the OAVs, if you've ever seen the original anime, which I think was only 26 episodes, and it really only covered the storyline before Guts became the Black Swordsman. But it also covers the Behelit and how the God Hand exists and manipulates people through the Apostles and Behelit. It's there, but it feels chopped up. If I were producing this anime, what I would have done is I would have not gone over the old ground, because I think that's one of the flaws that you could really step into. Like, let me show the whole old series again. No, you don't have to do that. All you have to do is a 3 or 4 minute introduction explaining, at the end of the first episode, this is Guts. He's a man who has survived many things. He was a mercenary. He was born of whatever he's born of. I'm not going to give spoilers. That really only came out much later in the manga. And no, he's not like some Super Saiyan or anything. He's not a half Saiyan. Don't get me wrong. He's a normal old human as far as I can tell. But he's just very interestingly born. There's a reason why his name is Guts. And that reason is he's a survivor. And this is a man who survived a demonic assault and killed many demons that most men couldn't even touch. And he did this to save the woman he loved from his best friend who betrayed them all. And if you give the viewer that right up front, and you give them Guts' motivation, all of the hallucinatory scenes, all of the flashbacks, the nightmares, they all make so much more sense. And then the anime feels less disjointed itself. The animation, even where it seems to skip a beat, your brain tunes it out because you know where it's going. Okay, well, I know who Guts is. I know what he's after. And eventually they kind of touch on that with episode, I think it was 4, where they had Godo show up for like one day and then die as an old man because clearly that's all he existed to do. Hi, Cat. But I like it personally. And maybe that's just because I expect this. I expect that when Berserk is violent, it's fucking violent. It does not skip the issues of the Spanish Inquisition, as you could probably tell if you've been watching. That's pretty terrible. It's very representative of, the so-called High Middle Ages and the time just before the Europeans found America, and the Kushan are very clearly some sort of Arabic, Indian mix of things. They have war elephants, but they're also very mystical, which is sort of how people in Islam are viewed as like mystics and shit. It's complicated, but they even say this is a war about the naming of our god at one point, which I just think is hilarious because in Arabic, Allah just means God. So when someone's saying Allah Akbar, they're saying God is great, but they're talking about the same God that Christianity and Judaism are. It's just a different name. And as the series goes on, you're going to see more about what the Kushans really are like and what the gods are really like. And Guts has a point when he says he's seen about enough out of gods and miracles, because he really has, the poor bastard. But overall, I think it has a lot of room for improvement. I would have done things differently. I'm available for hire if you're interested. But in the meantime, I think what they need to do to make it better. Number one, they need to cut out any of that weird cell shading nonsense they're doing and just stick to one animation style. I feel like they switch it up too often. It does sort of capture the otherworldliness of a dude wearing that kind of armor and wielding that kind of sword. But every time he shows up and he's about to fight, the heavy metal guitar music comes on, and I like it more when something medieval sounding comes on. Bring me some Gregorian chant. If you've never heard Gregorian chant, just stop right now. Well, maybe finish the video, but after the video, type in the words Dies Irae. D-I-E-S, I believe. I should probably check it, but I'm not going to. I-R-A-E. Just D-E-U-S-I-R-A-E. That'll work. It'll bring up a song that, if you heard something like that, you might think, well, this is interesting medieval music. But if it's sung in English, it's a song about the end of the world and divine judgment. And that is what Berserk is about. It's a universe where the gods are kind of evil. You ever hear the story like, well, you better worship the gods you have, because if you don't, you're really screwed. That's kind of Berserk. And I think they're doing a fine job of hitting that nail on the head. They definitely make the evil guy look evil. Sometimes it feels like it's drawn out with some of the more violent scenes, but that's the point. It's supposed to disturb you. If you're like, oh my god, this is too violent, that's the point. This is what was done in a different context to real people who really lived in places like Spain. They're just famous because you never expect that in particular Inquisition. So those are my thoughts. You're free to disagree, and I would love to have you say hello and share. But in the meantime, I'm going to let you go now. It's been about 11 and a half minutes, and you deserve your freedom. So thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. Leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Let me know how terrible of an anime analyst I am. And hey, if you want more random talk about anime, I could talk about Dragon Ball Super. I really could. So, thanks for joining me. And as always, La Paz.